What's up, guys? All right, so I'm gonna try to get through this as fast as possible, so that I don't draw it out. You know, make this longer than it needs to be. All right, so uh, I think I already know what I'm gonna title this video. So if you're an atheist, really stick around. I actually want you to find holes in my understanding, my theory, my theology, whatever the hell you want to call it. I mean, technically, I mean, it is theology, but you'll decide for yourself what it is. You see, I don't really want to make this about arguing between my belief and other beliefs. Um, you know, uh, because that gets sticky and it's just not the conversation I want to have. But I'm just going to explain my conceptualization of God, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And then if you find actual substantive disagreements where something is clearly wrong and there's like some sort of evidence based way of proving what I'm saying wrong, then be my guest. But I've been thinking about this for a pretty long time. So here we go. All right, so cosmology. In the beginning, there was nothingness. Within this nothingness, there was potential. Some people would say that this potential was a thing or a singular thing or a infinitesimal speck that expanded, so on and so on. Now, there are different theories on what existed during that piece of time, but I personally don't think that anything actually existed, being that the word exist happens within the universe. Anything that we were to talk about outside of the universe doesn't exist, right? In order for something to exist, it has to exist within a place in space and some sort of time. It has to exist within those two, like, fundamental basic components, like, okay. So I don't believe that we can actually determine the size of this thing, or what I call potential, that existed in the nothingness. And I don't think that we can truly say that much about it. So what I think is that the nothingness is what was. This potential was there because we know something came out of it, and so on. Now, this is kind of a preamble because I want to link this to my later argument, which literally shows you. If you've read stuff like esoteric stuff, you might have heard like the macrocosm and the microcosm mirror themselves. So let's move forward. This potential expanded, thus manifestation. So from void or unmanifested became manifested. This separation caused space to happen because instead of one thing, now when you think about one thing, if there is one thing, then that means that there is absolutely nothing outside of it and nothing within it. And if there's only one thing, how can that thing truly exist? Because even if we was to say there's only light, well, if there's no surfaces for that light to reflect off of, then does that light actually exist? Like, literally, light would need something to reflect off of in order to exist. And yeah, okay, so now, um, okay, so we have that. Now, there's manifestation, there's separation. This separation draws a distinction between one thing and another. Therefore, now there is light, there is matter, there are interactions, there's physics, there's chemistry, so on and so on and so on. Way into the future, now we have Earth and there's people on it. Now, the macrocosm being that origin of the universe, which is the unmanifested becoming the manifested. So the manifested emerged from the unmanifested, is also mirrored in people. Now, this is a little more complex, but I'll try to explain it the easiest way that I possibly can. The I is unmanifested, and I'll explain why, but hold on. The self, which I draw a distinction between I and self. The self is manifested. So the self is a manifestation that emerges from the unmanifested, which is the I. Now you're probably thinking the I and the self is the same thing, but I'll explain. Now, and I will get to what this has to do with God. Now, this is the thing. The self is the accumulation of possessions, actions, characteristics, traits, things that can be described. This is our individuality, aka the spirit. So a lot of spiritual people will try to make you will argue for the spirit as being this, you know, like otherworldly, ghostly thing, like a little ball of energy that wears a sheet over its head. And this is the spirit, but that's not actually what it means when you actually go into the esoteric teachings behind where all of the superstition came from. The spirit just means the essence of the spirit, like a spirit, like a wine or a lick, like no, no, like a lyric, a liquor, right? That's the spirit of whatever that particular thing is derived from. So maybe bry or something like that, whatever, right? So the spirit is the essence of you. The spirit is all of the things that makes you who you are. That is the self. So the self is like, this body is part of myself. My mind, my brain, and the mind that emerges from it is a part of myself. All of the thoughts, feelings, the experiences I had, the beliefs that I develop, the actions that I will later, these are all parts of the self. Now, all of these things that I'm talking about are either possessions or actions. So these traits and characteristics ultimately get reduced to either a possession or a action. So my face, this is a characteristic that I hold, and there are not many like it, and you can tell this one apart from other ones. But this is a trait that I have, but it's a possession. Myself is this, possession, which is the face, but the I is the one that possesses it. Now I'll continue explaining. Now, so I explained that, and I hope that I didn't speak too fast. Now let me talk about the I. The reason that I distinguish these two is because the only thing we can actually say about the I is that I am. We know that the I am being a verb, to be, so that means that the I is, we know that the I is, it is being, but we don't know anything else about it. Now you might say, I can describe my I, like I can describe myself, right? But myself, that's the self. You can't describe I. All you could say is I am, or I have, or I do, right? So the I is ultimately intangible, indescribable, ineffable. And if you try to describe the I that you reference when you say I am, try to describe it right now to yourself without mentioning a single possession or a single action. So nothing that it has and nothing that it does. Now try to describe your I. And now I'm going to give you one step further, something a little bit harder. Try to distinguish the I you reference when you say I am from the I am referencing when I say I am. What is the difference between that I and this I, right? What are the differences? Because if I talk about, well, my face looks like this and that's a possession. I have a body, right? All of the things inside of here, like the brain, I have a brain, I have a mind, I have experiences, I have thoughts, I have feelings, I have beliefs, I do actions. I have consciousness. Now we might say, well, when you say it, you actually say I am conscious, but conscious is kind of a verb. Conscious is a thing that you're doing. The I am is being, so I am being conscious. It's kind of a verb. When you're actually talking about the thing itself, it's not conscious. You can't talk about conscious and say, well, conscious has this and that. No, you talk about consciousness. consciousness is the actual thing, and you're talking about, when you say consciousness, you're talking about the thing itself. But when you're talking about doing it as an action, like I am being right now, I am conscious right now, then whatever, right? So consciousness has two things to it. It's something that you have, and it's also something that you do. And awareness is something that you have. Um, right? It could also be something you do because you can focus on a specific thing and make yourself aware of it. So yeah, all right, but let's keep trying to move forward so that I don't drag this on forever, or we'll literally be here until Jesus comes back. Just joking. Um, all right, so okay, so this is so like before I was mentioning that the self is the spirit. This is what the spirit means in esoteric knowledge, and like when you go into like the puede bajar eso por un segundo. So this is where that comes from. The soul is the I. So this is the idea where God comes. You see, the idea is that there is one God. God is all. God is one. There is only one soul, the I. You can't differentiate your I from my I because all eyes are the same. When somebody says I am, we're all referencing the same I. The I is the soul. The soul is God. God is everything. Everything is God is the entirety, which is one soul, and everything that emanates from it is a fragment of it. But if God is everything, therefore it's infinite, then every piece of infinity is also infinity. So thus, every piece of the manifestation which emanates from the unmanifested is also God in the same way that the unmanifested is, just with a slight difference. Like clearly, unless you have reached very, very high levels of meditation and you have been able to literally disappear, like imagine a dream, like imagine falling asleep and not dreaming, but not that you didn't remember the dream, but that you actually stopped being conscious. Like you just disappeared. It's not that you didn't remember, it's that you literally had the absence of experience for a prolonged period of time, right? So this is the dichotomy between the unmanifested, which is the supreme God, and then the manifested God, which is the deity. So we have all of these ideas of what God is, and a lot of people try to anthropomorphize it and make it a man or a woman, or it's a tall man, it's a short man, he has a beard, he's white, he's black, he's this, he's that. You know, he's from the Middle East, he's from Japan, he's from here, he's from there, right? And we have all these different names and all these cultures and rituals and religions and all these things that pertain to all these different gods and whatever. But all of these gods are just manifestations. They are deity. Those are manifestations, and they're not exactly what you think they are. A lot of people, when they argue against these things, they're actually fighting a ghost. Because the people that believe in them the way that they do nowadays are more into the superstition of it, and they believe it to be something outside of themselves, where these things are spiritual. They have a self. We created that self. These selves are literally like a manifestation of a collection of a particular region or tribe or culture or so on and so on. The people behave in certain ways, do certain things. This gets led on to their gods. Oh, God is like us, so therefore he must also, I don't know, freaking genocide the Edomites or something, right? I'm being extreme here, but different cultures are going to say like, well, we like murdering the people to the north. God must love it too. And other people would be like, well, we love complete passivity and never being violent. God must love it too. So everybody comes up with all these things. But ultimately, All of these things are just manifestations that stem from the ultimate supreme God, which is unmanifested. Now, this is the kicker, that the unmanifested is technically non existent. Therefore, it can't be called God. So once you transcend that level from manifestation to unmanifestation, like unmanifested, there is nothing. There is literally nothing. There is no God, no nothing. It's complete and total void, emptiness. And when I say void, I don't mean a vacuum. I'm not talking about like a corner in outer space where there's absolutely nothing. That's still something. There's still time and space there, and there's still things outside of this area. I'm talking about no time, no space, no physics, no chemistry. Absolute, complete, and total void, right? So, Supreme God is not God because calling it God completely undoes what it does, like what it is. It completely, like, I don't want to say taints it, but kind of like you like if it's unmanifested and it like there's no qualities, no characteristics, no nothing to be able to describe, then how can you give it a title or a name or gender or beliefs or commandments or prohibitions or whatever, right? It's like a deist kind of way of thinking of God. um, Now, everybody ends up doing these things in different ways because we have monotheism, which is popular in the moment. And you further back you go, you have your polytheism, your pantheism. More back, you have things like animism. So, if you were to believe that God is this specific manifestation, that is a manifestation of God, but you're worshiping a manifestation of God. And if you believe that God is the river and the mountains and so on, this is also valid, but you're worshiping a manifestation of God. But I'm using the term God simply so that you understand what I'm talking about, because when you actually understand what unmanifested is, complete and total void, it ceases to be able to possess any type of title, name, or attribute. It like there's nothing you can say about it. It's just the absence of existence. It's the absence of experience, the absence of consciousness and awareness. It's like it's just nothing. So the what I'm ultimately trying to tell you guys is that fundamentally God does exist, but it exists in a way completely alien to our understanding of existence. Therefore, under our interpretation of what the word existence means, it doesn't actually exist. But it still has an effect because everything that exists emanates from it. Everything, and it is present within us because this I that we that is in here, the I that I reference when I think of myself, this when I say I am, this when I think of myself, I'm thinking of the I, but I'm actually thinking of the self, which is all of the things placed on top of the I, right? But we don't draw that distinction because we're not aware of it. Once you get aware of it, you realize that when you're thinking of yourself, you're actually thinking of the self, which is all the things that we've collected over time. So, you know, we've aged in different ways. Our Some of us work out, some of us don't. The body, the way that we look, the whether you got hair or no hair, beard or no beard, whether you're a woman, a man, or whatever other gender you prefer to be called as, whatever it is, all of these physical traits and everything, these are things that we sort of developed and collected over time. All of these traits, when it comes to characteristics like internal characteristics like character and personality, and all of the actions that we engage with, whether it be hobbies or profession or all of these things, these are all things that we have stamped or imprinted over this thing that we call the self. And underneath all of that is the untouchable I that can't be described in any way, shape, or form. So this I is the soul, this I is God, therefore we are God, but not in a way where I'm saying I'm God, worship me, or you're God, I'm going to worship you. It's more like saying I is God. I'm not referencing I am as in the self. I'm not saying this self, this guy over here with this face is God. I'm saying the I itself. So I am, I know that I is, but the I itself is God. And the I itself is the soul. And there's one soul. Now, you might say, well, if God is everything, then doesn't that mean that everything has a soul? Well, there's only one soul. So every single thing is the soul. And how do we understand that? Because then wouldn't that mean that the moon and the sun and the river or a rock has this, possesses this I, or is this I? And it is this I, but it lacks the spirit, it lacks the self. It doesn't have the self. Therefore, it has no individuality or personality or consciousness or awareness. So the I mean, the moon is, it is being, it exists, it's there. We can see it, right? But it's not aware of itself, and it's not aware of us. It's not aware of its actions and its effects. It's not aware or conscious of anything. It simply is. So the moon is closer to God than we are, because all inanimate objects, whether they be natural or unnatural or whatever, these things exist in a fashion where there is no self. So within it, there is no separation between it and anything else. It does not recognize that, like this like a table is here. That table does not recognize that it is what it is, and it is there, and there is some space, and then beyond that space, I am. It's not aware of that. So this is the same as the unmanifested. So it's closer to the unmanifested. But the thing is, because of our individuality, ourselves, and our ability to conceptualize and understand and be conscious and aware, we are able to experience it for it. So, in other words, when it comes down to it, the majority of the universe is pretty much unconscious or in a state of unmanifestation. And the only way that it comes into manifestation is through the awareness of living beings or beings with consciousness and awareness. So, thus, that actually makes us pretty important, but not that important. I'll try to get to the end of this as quick as possible. This ends up meaning that we are God, and we are meant to know ourselves. We are meant to know ourselves. And by ourselves, it's ourselves, like multiple, plural. I'm meant to know me, myself, and I'm also meant to know all of the other selves and all of the other things. And by doing that, God understands itself. So God created God in order to know God, so that God can return to God. And it's kind of funny because I've heard of people saying, so God sacrificed God to forgive people for the sins that God created. It's kind of funny because it is kind of parallel, but the only thing is that this particular version of God doesn't say anything, but the nature of not saying anything is that there is no necessary sin or no sin. Technically, there is no morality. And I know that's kind of tricky, but it's kind of true. The fact of the matter is that, it's super subjective. Just because you believe in a specific God, whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or Hindu, there's going to be some stuff that you believe that's like, okay, that's pretty good. And then there's going to be some stuff that you believe that like, whoa, that's wicked. And if you're an atheist, it's the same thing. Like there's going to be a whole bunch of things that you believe like, oh yeah, those are really cool. That's so, morally superior. And then next thing like you're like slapping some random girl's ass or murdering a random guy or something. So, everybody has some good qualities, bad qualities, blah, blah, blah. Morality is completely subjective. It doesn't actually exist. Personally, I think that if I wanted to base my morality off of God, I would do it on something that's a little more stable and more built on like firm ground, like a better structure. So I don't really think of morality as good or bad or morality at all. Like there's legality, which is completely different because it's going to change all over around the world. But obviously, you should probably follow most of the laws in your land. Um, and if you really don't like a law because it's clearly unjust, then you should use the correct methods to change the law. But when it really comes down to what should you do and what should you not do, it's more about what's beneficial and what's detrimental. There are things that you could do that are beneficial to yourself and others. There are things you could do that are detrimental to yourself and others. You should do more beneficial things, less detrimental things. But the reality is that you're going to do both at some point. Just try to mitigate and, minimize the harm. Now, the point that I say this is because the unmanifested God, which is the supreme, above everything, this is where everything comes from, is like essentially like it's like a mixture of deism and pantheism. So there is no like there's nothing that you're commanded to do or prohibited from. Like you can literally do whatever you want. So ultimately, us being the manifestation of God, we are the ones with minds that can conceptualize things and thinks. We are the ones that describe morality. So God doesn't actually describe morality. We create morality. So if you want to create morality on some other thing that I feel might be flimsier, but you're free to do so, and everybody can come up with their own particular way of thinking of morality. But ultimately, I think it's better to think along the side of, what's beneficial, what's detrimental. And if I was to place them in order, I think maintaining freedom is number one, decreasing suffering is number two, and increasing pleasure is number three. So if these three things are beneficial for yourself and others, then these are the three things you should do. And the opposite would be detrimental to yourself and others, so you should not do. But you will clearly end up doing both at some point or time. So just mitigate for harms and try to do the best you can within reason. And obviously, there's going to be some, back and forth. Like obviously, telling your religious parent that you're gay and they're going to suffer, so you're not allowed to do that. That's a little too much. Your freedom probably outweighs that. But murdering your neighbor because they pet your cat, maybe that's a little too much freedom, and we should restrict the freedom for the sake of not causing suffering, right? So it's going to be a back and forth, and you got to really try to figure it out for yourself, because that's ultimately what we got. Like we just here figuring it out for ourselves, and everybody thinks that they got the right answer, but the reality is that they don't. Nobody got control of anything. Pretty much absolutely nothing created us, and nothing actually matters. But we can make it matter or pretend like it matters if that makes things fun for you. That's something. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna try to wrap this up before I start babbling and make this a little more unhinged than it already is. But I hope that I wasn't speaking too fast and that at least it made sense. So the self is the spirit, the I is the soul, the I, the soul, God is the same thing. These are aspects of the unmanifested presented in a form that we can understand because it's slightly more manifested than the unmanifested, like truly. Um, and then the self is full out manifestation. Um, so the individual, which is the self, that's me and my humanity. I'm mortal. The I, which is intangible and ineffable, is God. Therefore, God is in me, and I am. I is God. I am God. Right. Uh, and if we look at the origins of the universe, the unmanifested, the void that existed prior to existence or was prior to existence, that was God. Everything that manifested from it is the manifestation. We are all fragments of the whole, but the whole is infinite. Therefore, every piece of infinity is still infinity. All right, I think that does it. I think that does it. So yeah, guys, if you actually followed everything I said, tell me where I have any problems there. Tell me if there's anything wrong. And if you have specific questions, like what about spiritual things, like like what about people that believe in magic or prayer or this or that, some of these things do work, but they don't work in the way that you believe. It's less woo woo and superstitious. It's more about causing change within your psyche to make yourself behave in ways that will lead to the thing that you actually want happening. Like the ultimately, all of these spiritual things that causes change within reality would be typically called magic, and magic is labeled like not like you're like a magician pulling cards, but magic as in spiritual is causing change, creating change according to will. So whenever you cause change within the world according to your will, that's magic. Whether you do it physically or through some sort of psych up mess, like if you do a little ritual and put on your lucky socks before the football game so that your team wins, that's magic. If you, I don't know, donate $10,000 to the coach so that they can get better training, that is also magic. And I know this might not sound cool to you, but these are the actual definitions. These are the actual ways that these things work. Like this is the esoteric shit that like started it all. But unfortunately, a lot of people decided to go with the manifestation rather than the unmanifest. And the problem with the manifestation is that there's differences between this and that, and then you have to choose which one's better for you, and then you get trapped in these cycles of I believe this now, oh that challenges this, I have to believe it harder, oh my god I've been proven wrong, do I continue believing even so, or do I have to completely uproot my entire life and believe something different, oh my god I'm lost now, blah 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 blah. So rather than being lost and completely devastated, people rather continue believing whatever it is that they already believed and just find ways to believe it even harder. And thus, mysticism becomes superstition. And, you know, like my third eye chakra stops being a focal point where I concentrate my awareness that has associations and correspondence, so that when I'm meditating on it, I am associating all of these things that associate with it. And that is what I am meditating on. Now it's an actual eye that can see into your soul, right? So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't know how else to explain all of this, but my video is about to cut out, so I'm gonna leave it at here. And 33 minutes seems pretty good.